In this episode, we'll be making a trap that can be placed and it will damage an enemy if an enemy is within the vicinity of its attack range. Hello everyone, my name is Ramba Mamba, and in this episode, we will be making a trap so that a player can place it and it will be activated if an enemy steps over it. By the way, I just want to let you guys know that the music in this video is by my friend Darren, who makes really amazing music, and you should check him out and subscribe. I'll leave a link down in the description. Please consider subscribing. He makes really good music, and if you like it, maybe even, yeah. And he just released his full album, and he's making great music, so just support. So in order to make a trap, I'm first going to make a trap prefab. So I'm kind of going to design a little trap. So I'll create an empty object and I'll reset the position 0, 0, and 0. And then I'll create a 3D object and a cube under it. And I'll also rename our game object to trap. And this cube, I will change the size of it so that we can kind of make it look like a trap. But first, I'm gonna move my player out of the way. So in order for this episode to work, you can do it with whatever you have set up, but I recommend you have a first-person controller or a third-person controller set up. So I have this cube, right? And I'll edit the transform by clicking on the cube and then pressing R so that I can move to the scale tool, and then using the red, blue, and green buttons to change their size on each scale. I'll make my little trap to kind of look like what we want it to look like. So I'm gonna kind of make it really thin and kind of like a little big plane so that spikes can come in and out of it. That's actually perfect for now. And instead of naming it cube, I'll reset it to base. Then with the trap highlighted, we can get started making our spikes. So I'll right click, create a 3D object cylinder. And I'll rotate the cylinder 90 degrees on the X, 90 degrees on the Y axis, 90 degrees on the Z axis, and then reduce the scale of it significantly. And then if I press W, I can change my tool to the move tool. So now I can move the object around instead of scaling it. So I'll just place my first one right on the left hand corner. That looks good, and I'll move it up like that, like so. So I'm just gonna make these cylinders, and when we want to animate it, we'll make it so that they pop out a lot more, and then they kind of look like they're gonna spike you. That looks good. I'll actually duplicate this a couple of times by pressing Control D and then moving it down, and then I'll press Control D again and then move it down. And remember, the two tools I'm using to switch between scaling tool and moving tool are W and R. Press Control D again, move it to the middle. Now I'll just repeat this process until I have about 9 of these cylinders to kind of act as the traps. And then under my trap, I'll create an empty object by right clicking, and I'll call this one spikes, and then I'll drag all of my cylinders right underneath it by dragging so that I can kind of collapse it, and then it's just a lot more neater. Nice. Perfect. So I'll also select all the cylinders, and if I press R, I can reduce the scale, but not on that axis. I can reduce by changing the Z, or the green one. That looks good, so that they're a lot less subtle. And now, in order to make it look a little bit better, I'm gonna add some shaders to it. So I'm gonna add a couple of materials, and so I'm gonna open up my materials tab, and I already have a red material, but if you do not have one, you can right click, create, and then create a new material. You can name it anything you want. I'll be making a black one and a red one, and for the black one, I'll name it black, and then on the albedo, I can change it to black. And of course you can change the metallicness and the smoothness of it as well. So I'll change I can just drag this whatever I want to become black. So I'll change the background to be black. So I'll drag it onto the back. And I want this to be illuminated by the light a little bit more. So I'll actually move my trap a little. That way we can see it. And maybe rotate it. There you go. Now we can see what it looks like. So I just made the base of it black, and then I'll make all of these cylinders red. So I can select all the cylinders by pressing shift, and then I can just drag them on. I don't think it individually I don't think it lets you select all of them at once. So I'll just have to drag each and every single one of them. And after this, we can get started animating our prefab. There we go. So I'm going to add an animation tab, and if you do not already have that, you can click on these three dots, add tab, and then add animation. And I already have one, and so I'll click on that tab, and with the trap selected, I'll start creating a new animation clip. So I'll click create, and I already have I already have an animations folder within my assets, but if you do not, just make one, and then inside of my animations, I'll call it spike. So we can hit this little record button right here, and then now whatever actions we do, it'll represent them. So at around 35 seconds or so, I'll select all the cylinders, and by pressing R, I can scale them up, and then at the same time I can move them, oh, not that much, so that they're still within our trap. So now if we hit play, you can see it kind of looks like it's growing, which is exactly what we want. We just want it to happen really fast. So I'll actually delete this, the delete key, and then at 40 seconds I'll press R, and I'll scale, oh my bad, I'll select all the cylinders with shift, and I'll scale these a lot, and then you can notice that they're sticking out the back, and then because it scales from the middle, so then I'll drag them all the way up so that they're still perfect. So now if we hit play, it looks like they're growing. Perfect. So I'll actually drag this animation a lot closer, so it looks a lot faster. That looks so much better. And then at 25 seconds, I want it to be fully spiked. So I'll increase the spike like a lot, and then I'll drag it out like usual. So that's what it looks like so far. Perfect. And now we can get started with the kind of the reset of it, right? So at 35 seconds, or actually at like 40 seconds, I'll set the scale back to whatever it used to be, really tiny, and then I'll move them back in to where they were. So now if we hit play, that's what it looks like. But I want to have a little bit of like a reload, and the way I'm going to do that is going to be kind of like a little bounce where the spike goes a little up and then a little down again, so that at like 45 seconds I'll increase it a little and move it up a little. Remember, the two hotkeys is R to go to the scale tool and W to move to the move tool. And then at 50 seconds or so, I'll reduce the scale again and move it back again, and then increase the scale again, move it forward again, and then decrease the scale, move it back. And I'll kind of spread these out a little. And if you notice, I can use the scroll wheel on my mouse to increase or decrease the size of the animation that we were able to see. So I'll kind of, oh, my bad. Kind of spread these ones out. So now when you hit play, there you go. That looks like a good spike animation to me. And that bounce is like a little reload almost, to kind of give it some time to reset so it doesn't spike you instantly again. Bang. Perfect. So now we can hit stop recording. We could pause this animation. And now, of course, we need a way to control this animation. So if I hit play right now, it's just gonna start. If I look at my trap, it's just gonna go. Ouch. Ouch. Well, it's just gonna go on and on and on. But we don't want it to happen randomly. We want it to happen if it's being triggered. So in my project, in my animations, we have something. We have our spike animation, and then we have the controller. So first thing, on the spike, I want to turn off loop time so it doesn't happen repeatedly. And then if I double click on my trap animation, you can see on entry it immediately transitions to spike as the default. We do not want this to happen, so instead I'm going to right click, create a new state, empty, and I'll label this, I'll make sure it's clicked, I'll label this as idle, right? And making sure that it has no motion, I'll right click on my entry and make state scene default and click on idle. So now on entry it'll go to this idle animation rather than play or spike. So now we just need to tell from script play spike. So we can do this by clicking on our trap and adding a script. But before we need to do that, we need to set the bounds of where this trap can be activated from. So I'm gonna double click on my spike animation, run through until it, oh, it's not willing to work. You might have to click on your trap to make it work. And then I'll reach the point of where it is at its max. And so now we can start making the boundary of where this trap should be activated. So I can do this by first make sure it's not on record. And then on my trap, I can, because it's an empty game object, I can add a box collider. And I can set its size to whatever I want, as well as, oh, as I can set the size to whatever I want, as well as telling it that this is just a collider just to be a trigger for an action. So I'm gonna make sure it says is trigger is selected on the box collider, and then I'll edit the boundaries. So now I can use this box and determine the boundaries of this trigger. So I will kind of move these boundaries around so that it fits the square of our trap. You know, and now it's filling up exact. If that happens, just click on your trap again and make sure to select edit collider again. So now my trap collider, where it'll be is trigger, is properly selected. So the computer we can tell from code if anything is within these boundaries, play the trap animation and damage our player. So now we can add a script, and I'll call this activation. It'll be a new script, and let's create and add it, and then let's double click on it to open it up in Visual Studios once it's loaded up. I can go to my project tab, my assets, and I'll drag it into my scripts folder, and then I'll double click on it to open it up in Visual Studios. So in this activation script, we first need to know how much damage our trap will be doing. So I'll make a public float called damage. Then we can make a new function that is built in by Unity, and oh, my bad. It's a built-in function by Unity that checks if anything is within that box collider we made. So it's called void on trigger stay, and it requires a collider other, which basically means that it checks whatever is between the boundaries of the box collider. And now we can check if that collider, which is named other, if other.compare tag, which will be how we can check what is what. So if it is an enemy, and we will make a tag for our enemy right after this. If it's an enemy, then we want to play that animation that we made. So transform dot get component animator dot play, and now we just need to specify what it was called, and I think it was called spike. This will be whatever the name of the animation was. So now we just need to take damage to whatever our enemy was. So if I open up my enemy script, I have a function called void take damage, and it requires the amount of damage we're passing in. So if I open up our activation script again, we can actually make a reference to this enemy script. So enemy, which was the name of the script, enemy, and that's what we will name it, is equal to other.transform.getComponent enemy. And now we simply need to start the function take damage. But first we'll check if enemy is not equal to null, in case it hasn't died or anything like that. Then we can simply just take damage. And if you're not following the series, you can do whatever method of damaging your player is, or enemy is. But for us, I have a script named enemy, and in it I have a function named take damage, which subtracts 1 from the health, which subtracts the amount of damage from its health. And yeah. So now if I save this, go into Unity. First I'll save my project. And then if I hit play, you can see nothing happens because our enemy is not inside of this box. But we first need to tell it what our enemy is by making the tag enemy. So if I head into my enemy, for example, which is my opponent, and I add a tag named I can add tag. So I'll hit the plus button and I'll name it enemy. I'll click save. And so a tag is a way of organizing everything by giving it kind of like a name tag. So now if I click on my opponent, on where it says tag untagged, I can click on enemy, and so now my opponent is my enemy. It is very important to understand that if I was to do this for my player, for example, I have an empty game object as the top level parent, and then right below it I have a graphics component. In the graphics component it has the capsule collider, and so the trap only recognizes the capsule collider, which is graphics, but we put the tag on player. So if you're doing this for something that has a top level component that is an empty game object and doesn't have the mesh renderer, or I mean the mesh collider, it is very important to make the object that has the mesh collider have the tag enemy. So for example, in my case, opponent has graphics on it and a capsule collider, so I set it to tag enemy. Next, let's make this into a prefab so that we can start instantiating this wherever the player aims and wants to place it. So I will make a new folder in our assets for our prefabs. So create folder by right clicking, and I'll call it prefabs. And then I'll drag our trap into this, and then I will actually delete the trap. Now if I double click on this prefab, I can reset the position to 0, 0 and 0, and the rotation to 0, 0 and 0 as well. Just like that. Perfect. Now we just need to instantiate this wherever the player wants. So we can do this by adding a script to our player. So I'm going to go to my player, add component, and I'll add the trap placer script. And then I'll I'll be sure to drag this inside the scripts folder, and then double click on it to open it up in Visual Studios. So what we want to do is that first we need a reference to the game object. So public game object trap, and then because we want to be able to place it right at the center of our screen, we need a reference to our position of our camera. So public transform cams, and lastly we need a layer mask called public layer mask can be trapped. So what a layer mask is a way of organizing something. So for example, on my desk I have my keyboard, I have my mouse, and I have my laptop, as well as my phone and a printer. So I can organize these things by making a layer mask for them. For example, I can have one layer for my keyboard and mouse, and then I can have another layer for my speakers and printer, just to organize them. So I made a layer that can be trapped, and then what we will do is in void update we will check if the user inputs a button to place a trap. So if input.get key down keycode.m, then we can shoot an invisible laser and see whatever it hits, and that's where we will place our trap. So we will do a raycast hit A raycast hit is where we will store the information of what it hits, and we will check if we hit anything using a physics.raycast, and we will tell it we want to shoot it from cams.position, we want to shoot it from cams.forward, we want to store the information of what it hits in out hit. We want it to go on for almost infinity, so I'll do 1000F, and then the layer that we want to be able to be checking is can trap be placed. Right? If it hits something within those things, then we can start instantiating our game object. So game object trap place is equal to instantiate, which is our way of creating a new trap, and we have to tell it at what position. So hit dot point plus hit dot normal times 0.001f. So this is where it will be instantiated, and we need to tell it at what rotation. So quaternion dot identity. So a quaternion is the way of calculating angles of rotation, and so quaternion dot identity is basically 0, 0, and 0 on the quaternion, and we want to instantiate it as a game object. So we'll simply say as a game object with a capital G. Now we just need to make it so that it looks at a vertical or a horizontal angle. So trap placed, and we need to tell it to look at its current rotation plus a normalized vector, so that it automatically changes to 90 degrees or 180 degrees. So trap place.transform.look at, and now we tell it hit dot point plus hit dot normal. There we go. So now if we go to Unity, if I click on my player where we added the script, it's saying trap, cams, and can trap be placed. So for trap, I'll go to my assets, my prefabs, and then I will drag in the trap. And then for the camera, it will drag in the camera. And then for can trap be placed, I'll actually create a new layer. So for anything that we click, I want my environment to, anything that's under my environment, right now I just have my ground, to be part of can trap be placed. So I will add a layer, and I already have a layer added. It's called can trap, but so you can create a layer called can trap, and then if you click on your environment again, you can choose a can trap layer, and then we can also set all the child objects of this to can trap. So that also changed my ground. And then if I go to my player, it says can be trapped. I will just select the can trap layer that I made. So now if I hit play, if I look at the ground and if I press M, it makes a trap. But as you can see, it's not making it in the direction we want. And if I create a wall under environment by right clicking on that and creating a cube, and then I'll just simply move it here. I'll also increase the size of it. If I make a wall here, and if I hit play, when I place it on the wall, it won't be perpendicular like it should be either. See, this time it's coming out sideways. When I put it on the ground, it's always coming out sideways. So the problem that we are having right now is that our prefab isn't being placed on the correct orientation. So I actually fixed this by rotating our prefab. Keep in mind, you do not want to rotate your top level parent, because your top level parent is the one that if you change it, it doesn't matter, because through script we set it to 0, 0, and 0 anyways. So make sure the trap object is set to 0, 0, and 0, and instead you change base and spikes. So I rotated base and spikes, both of them 90 degrees on the y-axis. Now we just need to fix our collider. So for trap, instead of the collider being like that, all wonky, we just have to kind of move it over. So I'm gonna edit collider, kind of move it over to the new to the new what is it called? To our new mesh, and then I'll extend this out a little bit again. So now we have our little trap back to normal, and it's on the correct rotation. So you might have to rotate your thing 90 degrees. You probably have to play with that, but for me what worked was rotating on the y-axis by 90 degrees. So now if I hit play, if I press M for example, I got a trap on the ground, and if I place a trap right here, I get one right there. So if I place one like right in front of an enemy, then it attacks my enemy. So that's perfect. Now we have a working trap that we can place, and it'll damage our enemies. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you found it helpful, please consider subscribing, because YouTube told me that only about 60% of you guys are subscribed, which is an up from last time, and it would be really cool if we could get to 70% this time of you guys that watch this videos subscribe, because subscribing doesn't cost anything and it helps me out a lot. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Make sure to save your project too, and also check out Darren's music. Thank you.